Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. And Madam Clerk, do we have regrets this evening?
We have regrets this evening from Councillors Duddock and Lapworth.
Thank you. Councilor, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I see none. Council, we probably should resolve into committee of the whole. That's going to need two of you to. Councillor O'Meara moves and Councillor Lischina seconds. All in favor? And that is carried, and we are in committee of the whole. Now, Council, you have two consent items before you, and they are truly small consent items. Councillor Hutchins moves them, and if there's no discussion, all in favor. Opposed, if any, and the consent items are consented to. We have no confidential consent items, and we have no public hearing items, but we do have a recommendation report on the Trinity United Church matter that we have spent a good deal of time on. And if you'll give your attention to Lee Musson, we will provide the public with a summary of the matter that we've been working on for all these, geez, it feels like forever, but anyway, away you go.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of Council. This evening you'll find my staff report on page 19 of your agenda. This is a recommendation meeting for a draft plan of subdivision and a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by Weston Consulting on behalf of Trinity United Church. The applications were received in March of 2016. They were deemed complete in April of 2016. A public information meeting was held on May 11th, and the statutory public meeting was held on June 13th. At the statutory public meeting, 2 residents did speak in respect to this application. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide a recommendation on these subject applications. The subject property is located generally west of Trafalgar Road, south of McCraney Street East, and north of Sewell Drive. The subject property is municipally known as 1250 McCraney Street East. The intent of the draft plan of subdivision is to create 3 residential lots on the southwest corner of the church property facing Sewell Drive. The intent of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the proposed 3 lots to an RL5 zone to permit the development of a detached dwelling on each lot. The balance of the site will remain as a place of worship. Just generally speaking, the church property is irregular in shape. It's approximately 1.2 hectares in size. It has 133 meters of frontage on McCraney, and it has 166 meters of frontage on Sewell Drive. This is a concept plan that was prepared by Weston Consulting in support of their application. What it shows is the proposed 3 lots are 15 meters wide. They have areas ranging from 685 meters squared to 890 meters squared. The church building is located generally central on the site. It has, the building is approximately 776 square meters in size. And there's an accessory building on the site which is approximately 113 square meters in size. The applicant is not proposing any changes to the church buildings. However, the church parking lot will need to be reconfigured in order to accommodate the 3 proposed lots. I will go a little bit further into the loss of parking on the site, but the proposed reconfiguration of the lot, of the parking lot, the zoning will still comply in terms of the required number of parking spaces. In terms of the Livable Oakville plan, the site is designated as low-density residential, as identified on Schedule I, the central land use designation map. The official plan does permit single detached dwellings within this designation, and the application conforms to the official plan. In terms of zoning, the site is currently zoned CU, which is a community use zone. The applicant has requested a site-specific residential zone in RL5, which is a residential low-density zone, to implement the land use as proposed and to establish appropriate regulations for the lands. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment that's in front of you this evening, in essence, drags the neighboring RL5 site-specific 115 zone over onto these 3 lots. And this slide is just a zoning comparison between the abutting zoning and what is proposed. What you'll see here is lots 1, 2, and 3 are larger than what the neighboring zoning minimum lot area. The lot frontage, front yard setback, interior side yard setback, and the height and number of stories is consistent with the abutting zoning that's currently in place. Under an RL5 zone, there is a maximum lot coverage of 35%. You'll see that the bylaw in front of you this evening is actually reducing that lot coverage. For Lot 1, it's being reduced to 27%. Lot 2 is being reduced to 24%. And Lot 3 is being reduced to 23%. Staff are also, as part of this zoning bylaw in front of you this evening, is imposing a maximum residential floor area ratio, which isn't typically what you would find in an RL5 zone. And I will go into a little bit more detail with respect to that shortly. The public information meeting, as I mentioned earlier, was held in May and was attended by the ward councillors and 4 residents. The statutory public meeting again took place in June, and 2 members of the public did speak at that meeting. There is one letter of concern that is attached within your agenda package this evening as Appendix D. And in terms of matters that were raised through the processing of the application, there's issues raised with regards to compatibility within the existing neighborhood of these 3 lots and the houses to be built, tree removal, and concerns about the reconfiguration of the church parking lot. In order to determine compatibility of these 3 lots in relationship to the neighborhood, planning staff did ask the applicant's planning consultant to prepare a lot analysis study. This slide shows the church lands outlined in red. It also shows the study area outlined in white. The study looked at minimum and maximum lot depths, lot frontages, lot areas, lot coverage, and side yard setbacks. And the staff report does provide quite a detailed analysis of the study that was prepared and presented to the town. The actual study that was submitted is actually attached to Appendix C of your staff report. I just want to touch on a couple of items, one of which is lot coverage. As I mentioned earlier, lot coverage in an RL5 zone is a maximum of 35%. This concept plan that was prepared by Weston Consulting did show a footprint for the 3 proposed lots, which would have a coverage for Lot 1 of 27%, Lot 2 24%, and Lot 3 of 23%. It is appropriate for the town to actually reduce the lot coverage in order to maintain the character of the neighborhood. If you didn't reduce lot coverage and maintain the maximum 35%, you could potentially have a larger home built on these lots, which would not be in character with the neighborhood. I also want to touch a little bit on the maximum floor area ratio. Within an RL5 zone, that's not a regulation that you would typically find. Dwellings in the area range in size between 195 meters squared to 279 meters squared in size. And staff are proposing maximum floor area ratios for Lot 1 of 34%, Lot 2 27%, and Lot 3 29%. In essence, what this would do is provide dwellings in the range of 225 meters squared to 240 meters squared, exclusive of a garage. In staff's opinion, that the combination of reducing the lot coverage and imposing a maximum floor area ratio will protect the character of the area by keeping the size of the dwellings more in character with the area. Tree removal was another issue that was raised at the public meeting. The 3 lots are proposed in an area on the church lands, which is a well-manicured lawn, and these front on Sewell Drive. These 2 pictures, one generally is shot to the south and one is generally shot to the north. One resident at the public meeting has suggested that the 3 lots could be accommodated fronting onto McCraney Drive in the location of an existing woodlot, and these pictures are of that woodlot. The resident had indicated that the woodlot was poorly kept with dead branches, dead trees, and it was significantly overgrown. Following the public meeting, I asked the town's forester to visit the site and provide comments about the woodlot abutting McCraney. And the comments from the town's forester can be found on page 38 of your agenda. It was his opinion that the tree canopy for the forest block is an established canopy, developed over many decades, and if the forest block would be eliminated, Oakville would lose a well-defined healthy forest. As such, planning staff would not be supportive of relocating the 3 proposed lots to the McCraney frontage. Another issue that was raised at the public meeting was with respect to the parking lot of the church and the reconfiguration. Currently, there's 100 parking spaces on site. The applicant is proposing 56 parking spaces, and required under the zoning bylaws, 56 parking spaces. The bylaw, how they calculate parking requirement for a church, is based on 1 parking space per 5-person capacity for the place of worship, plus 1 parking space per 22 meter squares net floor area for any additional accessory assembly areas. Following the public meeting, staff did ask the applicant planning consultant to undertake a review of the church parking lot. And the applicant did provide us a parking utilization study, which was prepared by Crozier. What the study did show was on a Sunday, a typical Sunday peak, there was 27 parking spaces being used. And on a Thursday peak, which is associated with an external group using the site, there was 46 parking spaces being used. I'd like to provide my conclusion, and it's the subject report recommends approval of the site-specific zoning bylaw and the draft plan of subdivision. The lot configurations, the height, density, and massing of the proposal is appropriate and incompatible with the adjacent land uses and is in keeping with the intent of the official plan. The proposal is a logical extension of the surrounding development in the area and represents an appropriate infill intensification with a stable residential neighborhood, and the proposal represents good planning. There are quite a number of recommendations within my staff report, but generally staff are asking that the Director of Planning be authorized to grant draft approval to the subdivision, subject to the conditions attached to the staff report, and that bylaw 2017-001 be passed.
Thank you very much for that very good précis. Council, are there questions before I poll the public? All right. Are there members of the public with information for council on this matter? Would you come forward, please, to the central podium and identify yourself for the clerk and share your information with council?
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of the public, and members of council. My name is Julia Pearden. I'm with Weston Consulting. I am the planning consultant for the Trinity United Church. We just wanted to say that we've enjoyed working with planning staff and the church on this project, and agree with planning staff's recommendation for approval this evening, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'll ask again if anybody has any. I want to thank you and Kurt for coming out.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kurt. Do you miss the place?
It's a home away from home, sir.
Mr. Franklin used to be a distinguished member of our council here. Councillor Grant.
Given that we don't seem to have any other comments from the public, I'm willing to move the staff
Oh,
recommendations.
wait, we may have one.
Oh.
Sir, did you have comments? Yes. So could you come and, as, I'll just repeat my invitation, please identify yourself for the clerk and share your information with council.
Sure. My name is Todd Sullivan. I live directly across the street from this proposed construction to take place. I spoke before. A couple things. In their last presentation, they dictated that they hired someone new to further grow their church. That was a new position in their last presentation. If that person is successful in their position, they're going to require more parking than they do now. Furthermore, I can show you pictures where the reconfiguration of the parking won't work. Their pictures would show that the parking exceeds completely all the way into Lot 1, already using what's there. And that's on a Wednesday or a Thursday. So I'm stating that their numbers are maybe a little generous and that reconfiguration is inadequate. And finally, the percentages with regards to the lot coverage being lower than standard, pointing that out, well, that's easily done when the lots are 2 times the size of any existing lot. So it's a little misleading.
Thank you very much. Any other information?
No, that's about all.
Okay, are there questions for the delegation? Thank you, sir. Councillor Grant, I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, sir, I'm just taking a look at the parking. Nevertheless, we have spent a great deal of time on this, and I know the circumstances behind the need to have these buildings put up, so I will move the staff recommendations, all 7 of them, I believe.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or debate? Shall I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Item number 4, the Livable by Design Manual, Site Design and Development Standards for Oakville. And Christina Tizard will give us the summary for the public. I'll say in advance that I congratulate staff on this work, and we're looking forward to the implementation, if I'm not getting ahead of myself.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. I'm here to present for your consideration and endorsement this evening the Site Design and Development Standards, which forms Part C of the Livable by Design Manual. My report can be found on page 79 of your agenda package this evening. So just to provide a bit of context and background, in 2009, the Livable Oakville official plan was adopted by Town Council and Regional Council. The plan provided a framework and policy context for decision-making in the planning processes. And from the plan, there were various projects and studies that were launched to implement that policy direction. One being the comprehensive review of the current zoning bylaw to bring into conformity with the official plan, and that was the InZone project, as well as embarking on the development of urban design directions for the lands associated with the Livable Oakville plan. So the design manual itself contains 3 distinct yet interrelated components. I liken the manual to a binder so that each of these components sort of slip into the binder and creates a collective. The first is Part A. So that's the urban design direction for Oakville, which was brought forward to council back in 2014, May. And that design direction applies to lands that are south of Dundas Street and north of the 407. And that was endorsed by council in May of 2014. The Part B are a series of documents that are either location-specific or land-use-specific. So for example, we have Designing Midtown. We have the North Oakville Urban Design and Open Space Guidelines that are both completed projects that would fall within that, that component of the document. In terms of land-use specific, we have the guidelines for residential communities that would fall into that category. And finally, this evening, we're looking at Part C, which is the Site Design and Development Standards, which would be applicable to properties and development throughout the town. And as we moved our focus from Part A to Part C, we went from sort of a macro, a town-wide, more to a micro level, where we're looking at standards to guide on-site development. So just very quickly, this is the table of contents from Part A, and I'm focusing in on Section C, which provides design direction for site development. And that was really the launching pad for us to move forward and the content direction for the Part C of of the manual. And that's the document itself, and it's found, it starts on page 86 of your agenda package. So the content for Part C of the manual, the Site Design and Development Standards, really comes from a variety of different sources. In green, you'll see those are the sort of town direction, whether it's our policies, our bylaws, or regulations, and various standards that we currently have in place, whether they're planning related or they're found or housed within our various departments. In the blue on the bottom there, we have from our practice. So over the last 10 years or so, we've been fine-tuning and refining the review process for various development applications. This was an opportunity for us to really codify, to document those practices, to put them into black and white and say this is how we do things so that the development community understands and is clearly made aware of our expectations. We also tried to balance that with a review of best practices. So we went out and looked at other jurisdictions, really as a way to validate the direction that we were proposing and had been taking over the last few years. And finally, we looked at other regulations, whether they're at the regional level or at the provincial level. So there's some new regulations within the Ontario Building Code, as well as our own universal design standards or the design of public spaces for accessibility. So we brought all of those sources, mined them for all of the good information that they have, and brought them forward into Part C, which really was an opportunity to create a comprehensive one-stop shop for all this information. And really, it was a first for the planning department to compile this content. We had in the past direction for, say, landscaping only, but again, we were trying to be as comprehensive as possible, with the goal of trying to create a greater level of detail to the policies, the regulations, the standards that we have, as well as clearly identifying those expectations, a starting point, so when developers come in, they know what our expectations will be. The next few slides speak to the first section of the document. And really, it's setting out where the Part C of the manual fits within the larger our umbrella of the design manual, and sets out our objectives. So our intent is to set very clear expectations for the standard of development, documenting those practices, incorporating best practices, as well as attempting to establish uniformity in the development review process to achieve consistency. The second was related to the document structure. So as hopefully you've had an opportunity to move through the document, our focus really is on on-site development. So development that's happening within the property boundaries. Predominantly, we're looking at this document as we assess site plan applications, or we may be looking at complex zoning amendment applications or other applications and applying that standard or direction, or being very, very clear on what our expectations are. We have a variety of links in the document that will link out to various resources, whether they're at the provincial level, regional level, or other documents. We've also incorporated margin notes where we've highlighted town policy or town regulations that have a direct guidance or direct implication on the standards within that section. And as well, we've done our best to incorporate graphics and photos throughout the document to really balance between the text and illustrations to help really articulate that direction. In terms of implementation, again, it's primarily through the site plan process, and we've been very particular about the language that we're using in providing those directions. So we've used the word shall, where the standard is mandatory, and that's predominantly where there's a regulation in place or a policy in place that gives us the teeth to be able to say shall. We also use the word should, which means the standard is expected to be achieved unless proven otherwise on good design grounds or an alternative solution meets the intent. So what we're trying to say there is that, again, this is the expectation. There may be other technologies, there may be other approaches, there may be some really unique site configuration or site issues that would warrant a deviation from the direction that we're providing. But again, we will assess that and have those discussions through the review process. And finally, we use the term recommended, which means we would like for the standard to be taken into consideration and incorporated where feasible. So more of an educative piece, but again, encouraging. And finally, in the introduction section, we have a very exhaustive list. I think it runs about 5 pages right now, on various documents. Again, we're trying to link this out to make this a very user-friendly document. So we have companion documents that where we've pulled key direction and content for the manual, as well as resource materials, and whether that's our own from the region, the province, and others. The document itself is divided into 4 distinct sections. We cover soft landscaping, hardscape, service facilities, and streetscape. And again, those align back with the site development section of Part A of our manual. So just the next couple of slides are just giving the some of the topics covered under each of those 4 sections, as well as a sample page. So for example, under soft landscaping standards, under existing vegetation, we provide information about tree retention and tree protection zones. Under treatments for required landscaping, kind of midway through the list, we build on the zoning bylaw, which identifies widths of landscaping that must be achieved either on the edges of parking areas or along the edges of sites. And the manual itself goes on to describe within those required areas what should be planted and how it should be planted. So whether or not the desired outcome is to achieve enhancement if it's along the streetscape, screening if it's a parking area, or potentially buffering if it's abutting a residential area. So again, it's talking about the content of those areas. And this is just a sample page from that section related to the tree protection zones. The next section speaks to the hardscape standards. And for example, pedestrian circulation, we provide standards and graphics that speak to pedestrian walkways, ramps, curb ramps, and stairs. Under vehicular access and circulation, we cover a range of topics varying from access driveways, on-site vehicular routes through a development site, passenger loading and unloading areas, as well as the surface treatment and edges for parking areas. And a sample page there shows, gives a bit of the preamble about the network of exterior paths of travel for pedestrians. And I'll just bring to your attention, along the right-hand side, there's that margin note that I had talked about earlier, which really outlines the town policy as well as any related documents. The third section, section 4, relates to service facility areas. So a lot of the back of house elements. And so we have, at the beginning there, we talk very generally about where these facilities should be located and how they should be configured to allow for that functionality, but to reduce impacts on the public realm or adjacent sensitive uses. And so some of those topics, we talk about refuse, loading areas, snow storage, and exterior lighting. And this is an example of the loading areas. And we've used a couple of images there to show that there's a variety of different ways this can be handled based on site constraints or particular problems. And finally, we get into streetscape standards. And I know at the outset I did say that the document really focused on on-site development, but when we have been processing development applications, there are instances where boulevard remediation may be required. And so this section really provides a bit of direction to an applicant when we don't have a streetscape master plan in place for that particular area. And of course, those discussions are all in conjunction with our colleagues within development engineering, engineering and construction as well as transportation. But it's really to give them a starting point in terms of our expectations. So one of the great things about the project is that although we started in a paper-based project, and certainly the attachment to this evening's agenda is a document, we really wanted to make this, I guess, have a life of its own. So we're hopefully very shortly after the endorsement of this document moving into a web-based document, if I can call it that. And so as you can see there on the screen, on the left is the document in its static form, and on the right is a mock-up that our colleagues in communications were generous to prepare for us this evening. And it really allows us to make this document easy to navigate, far more user-friendly than maybe a PDF, and hopefully it'll make it a lot easier for us to update on a regular basis. And that is our intent, to keep this very active and alive and constantly reflecting those expectations and standards. So in terms of consultation, we undertook several periods of consultation. So initially we met with town and regional staff to bring to them an overview of our project and to request from them their materials related to site development. We also had an opportunity to pick their brains extensively and to get the green light to proceed in generating content in some of those overlapping areas, so outside of planning and urban design. So that took a good bit of time, and then pulling those resources together. Based on those materials, we also added and documented our own current practices over the last 10 years or so, and the research on best practices from other jurisdictions. The early draft sections were circulated out to internal town departments for their feedback, and then that feedback was incorporated into the final document. And so that took place during September to December of 2015. And then finally, our final document was circulated back out to internal departments, external agencies, and also the development community, this time for feedback. We did receive written comments and had several meetings with various respondents. And the written comments that we received are detailed in Appendix B, starting on page 149 of your package. And it really identifies the concerns or the feedback that we received, town's response, and whether or not we were taking action, and that would being that we would incorporate or not incorporate the feedback into the document, and that is detailed in Appendix B. In terms of next steps, so we're here this evening. We're hopeful that should council endorse the document, that we will have the online resource available by February 28th or sooner. And beyond that, we are looking to consistently update the resource listing that's located in section 1.5. We see that the document content in terms of text and images, that as we get other great examples, we'll start to supplement that and really make it a user-friendly document. As other report studies come forward, we will mine them for content that's applicable to this document and bring those into place, as well as further consultations with either our various departments or external, the development community. So this evening, staff is recommending endorsement of Part C of the Livable by Design Manual, the Site Design and Development Standards for Oakville, and we are eager to commence implementation if successful.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
presentation. Councillor Hutchins has a question for you.
Yes, thank you very much. It was a very interesting reading, and I commend you for it. I just had a couple of questions. One of the recommendations is 20% tree coverage for parking lots and so on. Is there any particular reason why it wasn't higher or lower? I mean, is 20% the norm? Or is that, I mean, we're trying to get as much tree canopy coverage of oaks as possible in large parking areas is one of the areas where it's difficult to get. So I was wondering, since we're building new, if it could not be a little bit higher.
Through Mayor Burton, in terms of the canopy coverage targets, and those are found on page 99 of the agenda package, those are identified as based on land use and not by a parking area on a site. Yes, so it's for the entire site. So for example, employment, we would be looking at 20% for the entire site.
I also had a question on, do we make any suggestions of how porous the parking lot site should be so we don't get runoff or things like that?
In section, under the hardscape standards, sorry, just give me one moment.
Sorry.
That would be on page 130, speaking to surface and edge treatments. And so, pardon me, 25, really we speak to a variety of surface treatments and edge materials to differentiate between pedestrian and vehicle routes. So there we don't necessarily get into the drainage, although I believe under the green parking areas, sorry, just give me one moment. I think that's under the landscaping section.
Well,
Sorry, I'm not able to
It doesn't
locate
matter, but my question is to, perhaps we could look at that if we haven't done that, because that can make a big difference to the runoff of parking lots and where it goes and contaminating streams and all sorts of things, if it just percolates through. But that may or may not be.
We do speak to bioswales and other forms of, sheet flow that may not find their way
Yeah.
into a catch basin.
All right, thank you.
We have lots more. Don't anybody go away. Councillor Elgar and then Councillor Lischina.
Thank you very much for the report. I appreciate it, and I'm glad to see it. And I think it, for the most part, it's in very usable terms. But I'm having trouble on one area, and it's on page 101, and it has to do with the standard Proctor density. Now, I've got a compaction tool, which I purchased about a number of years ago, which I use, and it is in pounds per inch as you go down, okay? So you know what the compaction is. But my tool sure doesn't mention whatever a standard Proctor density is. And I'm trying to figure out how can I correlate, and how would anybody correlate what the difference is? Like, what does that mean? There's no numbers, it's just something that's standard. And I can't figure it out.
I would have to turn to one of, through you, Mayor Burton, I would have to turn to one of my colleagues who assisted in the preparation of the document. I'm not a landscape architect. I don't know if...
Through you, Mayor Burton. It's just a standard engineering term, but to be honest with you, I don't know off the top of my head how you would also make that that conversion from pounds, which is imperial, to standard proctor density.
That's going to get complicated for anybody to follow if nobody knows what it is. Pound, because I think most of the tools that anybody would have purchased would have been in pounds per square inch of depth.
From my experience, any specifications that are typically written for compaction are all put in standard proctor density. It is a.
So we have no
it's a-
idea what whether it's like going through asphalt or into a stone.
It's an industry standard for measuring.
So
density.
these tools that they've invented, they're useless unless we have, like, we need some kind of a template so that when you go down 4 inches, it should be so much compaction, 6 inches, 8 inches. Like if I just think the compaction we have had in different areas is what has been a big problem with trees, and I think everybody would agree to that. I think we've done a good job with the 2 meter setback and, 3 meters and all the other, and I think we've done, we've got the depth. But the compaction, if people that are planting a tree don't understand what it is, I think maybe we need to tweak that a little bit so people will know whether they've over-compacted it. And I'm just thinking, there's something, it just jumped out at me as something maybe we should look at. So, no, I decided to let staff who wrote the report give me the answer, but anyway. Well, isn't that interesting? Like, I don't know how anybody's going to plant a tree and know they've met it unless there's a pounds per square inch of pressure. That's how we normally measure. How they used to measure it across North America. But I just ask if you'd look at that, see if we can come up some kind of a guideline, whether it's 60 pounds. I can take you lots of areas, 300 pounds, when you go down the first inch, you're already at that much pressure. And you're in a red zone on the tool that a lot of people, well, I don't know, I use anyway. And that's what I'm asking for, to know what the numbers are. It's a standard, but I do not know.
It's a standard method of testing, not a standard result. So maybe what I'm trying to help.
Yeah, no, yeah.
What we're really wanting here is a set of standard readings that we want to use.
That's what that's what I'm thinking. We need something here in this document, which is really good, to make sure that anybody can actually measure and say, yep, we have not overcompacted. Some kind of a number I would appreciate.
So maybe we could ask for a follow-on.
Yes, I would like, when we get to that stage, I would ask maybe take a look at that. And the other thing I have is, I'm just, my concern has always been, and I've been on site plan for quite a while, and I don't think it'll come to a surprise to anybody on site plan that's been at the committee, but know that barricades at the ends of parking lots, and a lot of trees get ruined from a snowplow it keeps pushing over the curb, which is fine, and I know in a lot of cases on site plan we have asked them to put up barriers, like posts and board barriers, and I don't see it in the report. Could I have missed it?
I don't think it's there, Councillor. I looked for it too.
I'm just wondering whether we might consider adding that at a point, because
On page 112 appeared to me to be the logical place for it. And so with your agreement, we might have a couple of, and would you add for later?
yeah, those would be the two things I think. There's so much good in here. Like, I'm really happy to see it, but I just think there's a couple of tweaks, if we could put them in, that would be helpful. I would appreciate it.
Through you, Mayor Burton, we do have a section on snow storage, and that's on page 141. And so we do have some, not through,
Yeah.
sorry, not through the use of posts and barriers.
I don't think the councillor and I care how they're protected, only that
They are. Yes.
Yeah, that's my concern. And then maybe after next snowstorm, I'll take you for a drive around. I do a lot of managed by driving around, the MBDA program, and it's amazing some of the things I see when I look at parking lots and how they look after a major snowstorm, including Like, what about GO Train parking lots? Would they fall under this also?
Yes.
We got to go for a drive.
However, they are a governmental authority, and
I do realize that, but just, they are covered under this, though. I thank
No,
you.
I believe the province is immune to our regulations.
Well, that's my worry too, also, because I've got some pretty sad-looking trees after scraping off a large parking lot.
You need to take Kevin for a drive.
Yeah, I think, take him also. Okay, I thank you, and thanks for the report.
Councillor Liz Chinna.
Hello, Ms. Tizard. Thank you so much again for the comprehensive, detailed report. I also enjoyed reading it. One thing that struck me on page 142 is discussion about the exterior lighting. There have been a number of residents that have gotten in touch with me, and I know other councillors, about the new LED lighting with not having enough light onto the road, and there would be dark spots in between. And so I understand the issue about private property and the amount of light pollution and that kind of thing. So I just want to understand about, or if you can clarify how the standards here, because there's a lot of words shall used in here, and how the manual with respect to street lighting will impact the need to balance pedestrian safety and the light pollution.
through you, Mayor Burton, the standards or the direction provided in section 4.5 on exterior lighting speaks only to on-site lighting, so the lighting of parking areas or the lighting of building entrances. So this doesn't cover lighting on the municipal right-of-way or within parks. There's a separate document, the lighting of municipal rights-of-way and municipal properties. So this speaks only to lighting of parking areas or other site elements not on the roadway.
So the street with the houses, you're putting light posts on in front of 5 houses, so this is not covered in here then?
Do you remember? No, this would only be on-site development. So say, for example, if there was a condominium building that was being developed in an area where there's the residential, it would be only if there was parking areas associated with the condominium or the lighting over the entrance or other paths or things like that associated with that.
Thank you for the clarification.
No problem.
Councillor Chisholm.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Just twigged, with respect to residential lighting, does this cover residential lighting? Because a lot of the issues we're having residents with new infill, these new homes going in, they have so much lighting on them, you can see them from space almost. I mean, the lighting they have on their soffit all around the homes, and they're becoming a nuisance for existing residents. Does this cover that in development? The lighting of homes?
Through Mayor Burton, only if
Okay.
the development or the development of the home is coming through, say, a site plan application, or if a committee of adjustment would these standards be applied. However, we do have through our nuisance bylaws, some language that speaks to projecting light beyond the property line, and in fact, that's where some of our direction under site lighting, so 1 and 2, have come from. So we speak back to that bylaw.
Just, Ms. Tizard, thank you for pointing out page 141. In 5F, you know, we really do get good tree protection against snow storage, because 5F says snow storage should not occur upon or within a 3-meter radius of any existing or proposed tree. And so that leaves the councillor and I wondering if the word should, can we get some kind of shall? Now, I appreciate that the list doesn't all want to be shall. So what I'm imagining might work would be an insertion later that says, separate from item 5, that in no case, or in all cases, snow storage shall not damage trees by being piled up on them and so on. You know, the very thing that we've been nagging at site plan about for 17 years, maybe? Yeah, I think so. Something like that? Okay. So if there's no other questions, I'll look to Councillor Elgar for the motion, because you might have ready to hand the best ideas on the 2 add-ons that we want, the follow-ons.
Thank you. I like all of it. It's just if we could add on maybe 2 more little sections, and the one, and I'll let you do the wording, but it would be on the pounds per square inch as you go down. I think, you know, some type of table, if we could add it, so that everybody would know what you mean by what the standard Proctor density is, which is the standard apparently. And also, if we could maybe take a look at barricades. I know you've got in here about the 3 meters, but it's it should, and we know should doesn't mean shall. And you did a good job of pointing that out in the beginning.
But are you happy with wording that, instead of saying how, would say, trees shall not be, snow shall not be stored on trees.
Yes, within, and, you know, the trouble is, a lot of the existing parking lots and where the trees are now, I don't think it's gonna work. Like, I can think of, no, but I hear that, but as we keep growing in North Oakville, I do believe that everything's shrinking, and I think it's gonna be hard to get a 3-meter setback from anything going forward. So then we need, yes. Well, yes, or at least a barrier put up, whatever we can make work so that the trees aren't on more than a 45-degree angle at the end of a snowstorm. I just think the 3 meters is really good, but I don't see it happening in reality in North Oakville.
So let's focus on the
Outcome at the end of the day, no snow damage to trees. That's absolutely will do it.
So the clerk will turn that into a proper motion. All those Councillor Adams?
We were just discussing this issue of storage of snow around trees, and what implication does that have for street trees? And not only snow storage, but salt damage.
It has no.
I know this is, you know, a different thing, but I can easily imagine somebody saying, hey, you're killing your own trees. How come you're bugging us? And so we might want to consider this issue of how do we treat our own.
We self-insure on trees and we can replace the trees we damage. In this case, this is about regulating the creation of new space. I'm totally comfortable with the distinction.
Very good. Do we have trees that we plant on boulevards that are in the same kind of situation?
Well, we don't store snow on boulevards.
When you plow streets, you push it to the side.
But I don't see the trees that the town plow, when the town plows the streets, that the trees are leaning on a 45-degree
Oh, I
angle.
totally agree with you on that.
So
Anyway,
that's the reason.
The key thing here, Councillor, is this doesn't apply to the boulevards. And we, as council, can enact any standards we want for how we will plow streets. And you could bring forward a proposal on that regard. You were just having fun with us. Thank you for coming out. Shall I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. We have a presentation from our planning director on the notice of intention to amend bylaw 2010-20, 3114 Dundas Street West. And this is basically, I think this is, I won't speak for you, Mr. Planning Director, but this is catching up with this is almost a housekeeping matter, if I don't misunderstand, if I have this right.
Yes, Your Worship. I hadn't intended on doing a presentation, but merely to answer questions should there be any on this item this evening. But I'd be happy to go through the
Perfect.
staff report.
I see signs of questions, and there's one right here from Councillor Hutchins. Oh, then I have a mover. Do I have any questioners? I accept the motion from Councillor Elgar. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, one and all. Now, we have 3 confidential items that I really think we do need to go into camera for under the provision of the Municipal Act that allows us to meet in a session closed to the public for the purpose of considering matters of litigation or possible litigation, and the solicitor-client advice and discussion required to provide that. And so I'd look for a motion to that effect. Councillor Knoll.
I think we have a delegation that wants to actually speak to us
Oh,
about.
thank you. That's right, we do.
About one of them.
So, on the matter of C1, the OMB arbitration parkland valuation dispute with Dunbar at 2158, 2192 Trafalgar Road, we do have a couple of delegations on that. Thanks for the reminder. And you're up now. And welcome, and we look forward to your information.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I hope that's better. Thank you. Just as a starting point, it will just be me speaking to the matter this evening. My name is Sean Foran, and I am here as counsel for Dunbar Developments. And the matter at issue is a dispute with respect to cash in lieu of parkland for the property at 2158, 2192 Trafalgar Road. I wonder if we could just turn on the projector.
I believe we can get the projector turned on. They're probably noticing your need now and getting ready to switch over, and boom, there you go. You're up. They'll even zoom in for you.
Thank you. So Dunbar's lands are outlined in black, and they own the property on Trafalgar Road, which is north of Upper Middle Road, south of Glen Ashton. It's located in predominantly a residential neighborhood. And in October of 2015, Dunbar sought building permits for 112 townhomes, received a demolition credit for 3 dwellings, and so for cash in lieu of parkland purposes, we're dealing with 109 units. At the time, the town required cash in lieu of parkland payment of $2,603,663. That amount was paid by Dunbar under protest, and that amount equates to $23,887 per unit. As I said, there's 109 units in this particular development. Many of you know that Dunbar are experienced developers, so they recognized at the outset that this number was exceptionally high. They paid the amount, as I said, under protest, and retained experts and did their research. And the results of that research, as I will proceed to explain, bore out their concerns. I should say that the cash in lieu of parkland has been appealed, and there is a hearing scheduled at the Ontario Municipal Board for early March for approximately a week. Now, the purpose of parkland dedication, as we know, is to ensure adequate public parks are provided for when development brings new residents to a municipality. And the municipality has the option, of course, of taking this as land or as cash payment in lieu of the dedication of land. And the rate established under the Planning Act and the rate in effect at the time was 300 units or 1 hectare per 300 units. That rate has since changed, but we're still proceeding under the 300 unit rate. Following the payment of the cash in lieu of parkland under protest, Dunbar made an FOI request and received some interesting information, and I'm just going to put that up for the benefit of council. And we can zoom out, yes, if we could zoom out a bit. And I'm going to apologize now. The nature of this discussion involves a discussion of numbers, and I hope that I can deal with that so that I'm not overwhelming council with numbers. But As a result of its FOI request, Dunbar came into information with respect to other comparable sales in the area. One of them being at 2385 Culsa Gate. And the cash in lieu of parkland paid with respect to that development was $3,348 per unit. That was a payment in 2014. The second piece of information it obtained was with respect to development at 3113 Upper Middle Road. It's the second property on the schedule that's up on the screen. And the cash in lieu of parkland for that development was $9,750 per unit. Both of these developments are townhome developments like the Dunbar development with respect to the lands at issue. That contrasts with a payment of, as I said, cash in lieu of parkland by Dunbar at the 2158, 2192 Trafalgar Road of $23,887 per unit in October of 2015. So there is definitely a significant swing in the amounts paid per unit. In addition, Dunbar hired an appraiser to do an appraisal of its property as at October of 2015. The required valuation date is the date before the issuance of the building permit. Our appraiser appraised the land at $1,500,000 per acre. And based on this appraisal, the per unit cash in lieu of parkland should have been $12,385 as opposed to the $23,887 per unit paid by my client. That $12,385 per unit is not out of line with the Upper Middle Road property that I just showed you on the schedule. Dunbar also provided information to the town in an offer it made in November with respect to a sale of the abutting property. So I've put back up the aerial view, and again, the Dunbar lands are outlined in black. And I'm just pointing to right next to it, to the south. That property sold in January of 2016 by another developer with the intent to build similar townhomes. That property was purchased for $1,678,596 per acre. So slight increase from the $1.5 million per acre value that our appraiser concluded was the value of the Dunbar lands. And being next door to the Dunbar lands, we say that that property provides an excellent comparable for the relevant market value for our client's site. It's next door. It was purchased with the intent to similarly develop it. And in terms of timing, the property was purchased approximately 3 months after the valuation date at issue in this cash in lieu dispute. At the $1,678,596 per acre rate, this would equate to $13,859 per unit, which again is consistent with the Upper Middle Road property that I showed you a few minutes ago, and I'll be showing you again. And on that basis, Dunbar submitted an offer to the town on November 1st, relying on really the sale of that property next door to the south. And it offered to settle on the basis of cash in lieu in the amount of $1,507,070.71. And the calculation was set out in the offer to the town. We also bear in mind that there is a recent decision from the municipal board from last year, which really directs the parties and their appraisers to pay particularly close attention to the sale of the subject lands, and I would say by extension, a property that sells next door, and that's selling for similar development intentions. And that is why my client has placed a particular reliance on the sale of the property next door. In this case, Dunbar bought its lands in December of 2011 and May of 2012 at the rate of just under $1.2 million per acre. And relying on this purchase, the per unit cash in lieu would be approximately $9,611. We acknowledge that that was a sale that concluded in 2012, and there needs to be a time adjustment. And as you will see in the next few minutes, I say that that's built into the offer that my client is prepared to make in order to settle its application today. So, as I said, the offer it made in November was an offer to pay cash in lieu in the amount of $1,507,070, or approximately $13,826 per unit. And that represents the highest per unit rate derived from the various sources I've displayed for you this evening: the Upper Middle Road property, the Calsup property, the property next door, and indeed our client's property. And as some of you may know, with the receipt of this information, an offer was made, as I said, on November 1st, and there's been some without prejudice discussion between our clients and staff since that offer was made. We know, because during the course of the appeal process before the board, appraisal reports have been exchanged, and to be fair, the town has delivered 2 appraisal reports, which we do not agree with, and if the matter isn't resolved, we'll be responding to further through the OMB process, should we continue on with that process. But the 2 appraisals from the town indicate, or one of them is at $2.7 million per acre, or $24,770 per unit, and the other one is at $2.6 million per acre, or $23,853 per unit. So there is a gap between the town's appraisers and our appraiser. All are experienced appraisers, all are experienced in cash in lieu of parkland issues. And as I said, my client has made an offer to settle at the rate of $1,678,596 per acre, and that's the value of the adjoining land sale, the closest property. That said, we recognize that there is a hearing upcoming in March that's going to involve a considerable time and expense for our client and for the town. And as a result, our client is continuing to display flexibility in terms of its willingness to settle this matter. And in that regard, in an effort to reach a settlement and avoid the cost and risk associated with a contested municipal board hearing, our client is willing to meet the town more than halfway between the spread that I've just described for you, on the basis of cash in lieu of parkland, on the basis of $2.2 million an acre, or $18,121 per unit. And so just to put that back up to make it clear, the cash in lieu of parkland that was paid by my client was $23,887 per unit. The offer made in November was $13,826 per unit, and the offer it's making today is $18,121 per unit. And that is more than halfway between the spread between the town and our client. And we think this is a very, very generous offer, not only because we're moving up past the halfway point, It is an offer that is between $8,300 and $14,770 per unit higher than the comparables that I've reviewed that are on this sheet on the screen. It is approximately $5,700 per unit above our client's appraisal. And importantly for our purposes today, our client's offer is approximately $4,300 per unit, or $468,122 above the November 1 settlement offer. It is a significant increase. And it is also more than 30% higher on a per acreage basis than what the neighboring property sold after the October 2015 valuation date. And so for all those reasons, we say, through you, Mayor Burton, that this is a very reasonable offer. Our client is willing to settle to meet the town more than halfway, and we're confident that this offer is a better result for the town than if the municipal board were to hear this dispute and decide the value of the lands, not only for all the reasons that I've just taken you through, but also because of the potential precedential implications that the board's decision would have, and the other factors that might be considered in the context of a hearing. Our client, as I said, would prefer to avoid the time and the cost of a hearing, and we're of the view that the avoidance of that cost and expense would also be in the best interest of the town. And so with that said, I thank you, Mayor Burton and members of council, for your time, and would be happy to answer any questions.
Councilor, do you have any questions?
Just one question. The property you're referring to the south, is that the property between the Wagaway dog kennel and your property?
It is, through you, Mayor Burton. Yes, it is.
So it's got one house on it now and it's totally treed right now, correct?
That's my understanding.
Correct. Thank you.
So, I have 4 questions for you. First, with respect to your handwritten chart here, is the difference between $23,887 and $18,121, is that difference roughly $5,700 or $5,800?
Just 1 second.
And don't put your calculator away. I need you to do one more calculation.
$5,766.
We've agreed on something.
So
Now,
far.
what is the difference between 18,121 and 13,826? Is it almost 4,300?
Almost 4,300, Mayor Burton.
Okay, so will you understand if I, from my end, looking at, I'm at 23.8, if I don't call that halfway, like we're coming down more than you're coming up, is the notion I'm putting to you? Are we not being asked to come down $5,800 and you are offering to come up 4,300? Anyway, that's rhetorical. That's you don't need to answer that.
I'll accept the numbers and I'll
Okay.
do the calculations.
So what significance, in terms of the formula that we're given by the Act to calculate cash in lieu of parkland, what significance is it to put it in terms of dollars per unit as opposed to total cash? I mean, as I understand the Act, the dollars per unit, that's not a form of, that's not the prescribed calculation.
The dollars per unit is not a prescribed calculation, but we are talking about, in these circumstances, and in the comparables we're looking at, we're talking about townhouse units. And
Okay.
it's one comparable. There are other comparables per acreage.
Well, if we're going to talk per units,
I-
what's the per unit selling price of these townhouses?
Mayor Burton, I don't have that information.
Do you think it's possible that they're $1 million or more?
It's not possible.
Okay, thank you. Do you know where Tulsa Gate is?
I have a general familiarity, yes, I do, at the Bronte Road, the old Bronte Road area.
Are you familiar with Oakville enough to understand why no one on council would regard them as near each other? Tulsa Gate and Glen Ashton?
Yeah, I mean, it's all relative. I'll say, Tulsa Gate is nearer to Trafalgar than other properties maybe, but I can tell you that appraisers for both of the parties have used Tulsa Gate sales as comparables.
Okay, but you accept that it's several kilometers away?
I don't know the exact calculation, but I do accept that, yes.
Okay. Finally, have there been any other transactions in the near vicinity to this that you haven't told us about or that we might need to know about?
There is one transaction further south from our client's property that was sold later in 2016. I'm assuming there are other comparables that predated the, well, I don't assume, I know that there are other comparables that predated the October 2015 valuation date that all three appraisers have referred to. Not all of them are the same, some of them are different.
Would you like a bonus question? Is that your final last offer, the $18,121?
That's our final last offer.
Thank you very much for your information.
Thank you, Mayor Burton.
I need a motion to, as I repeated earlier before we took the delegation, Councillor Knoll, all those in favor? Thank you. Let's have a 2-minute bio break while we rig the room for a meeting closed to the public for the purposes as described in the resolution. We'll be right back. Okay, Council is, I'm now calling back into session this meeting of the Planning and Development Council after having met in a session closed to the public for the purpose of, as we are permitted to under the Municipal Act, for the purpose of considering client solicitor advice and the communications necessary for that, and matters concerning litigation and/or prospective litigation. And in that meeting, staff direction was provided on the OMB appeal of the cash in lieu question on the parkland valuation dispute with Dunbar, and council made a decision on the second item, moved by Councillor Knoll, that the appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board of Committee of Adjustment Decision, CAV A 157, 2016, 2988 Bristol Circle be withdrawn. And since this matter can be made public now, I'll just ask you to vote again on that in public, Council. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And then on C3, the OMB appeal at 3358 Lakeshore Road West, Council made a decision which also can be made public, and so I'd ask you to vote on that again. And it was moved by Councillor Knoll that the appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board of Committee of Adjustment Decision, CAV A 143-2012 at 3358 Lakeshore Road West be confirmed. 2, that the without prejudice offer of the applicant to withdraw his appeal of the in-zone zoning bylaw 2014-014 in OMB case PL 140317, subject to the withdrawal by the town of its appeal of COA decision CAV A 43-2012 be accepted. And all in favor?
Your Worship, could I ask for a recorded vote on that?
Yes, you can. All those in favor rise to be named, and we'll then do the same thing for those opposed. So in favor, Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Mayor Burton, and Councillor Robinson. Please rise to be named in opposition. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Hutchins, and Councillor Elgar. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. And then we have the advisory committee minutes for the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee, November 20th. And the recommendation before you is that one item be approved and the rest received. Is there a mover for this report? Councillor O'Meara, thank you. All those in favor? And that is carried. And now we need a motion to rise and report to council. Councillor Hutchins, thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 1 and 2, discussion items 3, 4, and 5, confidential discussion items C1, C2, and C3, and advisory committee minutes, item 6, as noted by the clerk. May I have a mover and seconder for the report? Councillor Elgar and Councillor Lischina. All those in favor? Opposed, if any. The report is adopted. Is there new business of an emergency, congratulatory, or condolence nature? I'm not aware of any either. Could we have a mover and seconder for the bylaws then? Councillor Grant and Councillor Adams. All those in favor? And the bylaws as listed in the agenda and noted by the clerk are hereby adopted. That completes the agenda. Thank you for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and we are adjourned.